collective amnesia on the opposite side. I've raised it on a number of times, and many of them served as ministers in the previous government, and they knew exactly what the risks were to our national security.
Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've just returned hot foot from a very full Mar-a-Lago. And I've spoken to several members, senior administrators especially, of the incoming administration who will be in the White House in 32 days' time. Let me assure you, there is very deep disquiet amongst all of them as to what this may mean for the long-term future of Diego Garcia and whether such deal would hold, given the precedent of the deal break over Hong Kong. They also can't understand why we would surrender the sovereignty of these islands on an advisory judgment from a pretty obscure court. But this is about sovereignty, and you keep saying yourself that the sovereignty...
No, we can't both stand. When you say you mean me. I am having no ownership of this decision. Right?
Fair enough, fair enough. Can we please, if we respect the sovereignty of Gibraltar and the Falkland Islands on the basis it's what the people want, can we have a referendum of all of the eligible Chagosians and let them decide what the future sovereignty of the Chagos Islands is? That surely is the only fair solution.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we've been very clear that these were negotiations between the United Kingdom and Mauritius, and I've set out in the past the reasons for that. The interests of the Chagosians are absolutely at the heart of this agreement. As I said, I've repeatedly engaged with them. And I do find, Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman continues to speculate. With the greatest respect, he does not know the detail of what is agreed. He doesn't know the detail that has been shared. He doesn't know, Mr. Speaker, the detail that the national security apparatus of the United States has considered, and I am confident, Mr. Speaker, that he would have his concerns allayed when he sees the detail of this deal.
Dr. Andrew Mills.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and a Merry Christmas to you. The Minister says that views across the Chagosian community is mixed. In my experience, Mr. Speaker, when politicians say that, they're simply choosing the views they want to hear. Will the Minister therefore take the opportunity that has been given by the incoming Mauritian government to take a breathing space in which he can consult formally and in a structured way with Chagosians to find out what they want?
Mr. Speaker, I've engaged with Chagosian communities twice in recent months, as is made clear in answers to a number of parliamentary questions tabled by colleagues of his. Their interests will continue to be at the heart of this agreement. I take their concerns very seriously. I'm being quite honest, Mr. Speaker, that there are a range of views. There are some who oppose the deal, and there are some who are in favour of it. That's completely natural in a democratic process.
Let's go to a long-term campaigner. Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, having been a member of the Chagos Islands Group ever since it was founded and had a lot of interaction with Chagosians over the last 25 years, I can assure him that I've met many Chagosians in this country and in Mauritius. They were abominably treated and shortchanged by the deal of 1968 and then later removed from the islands. Their one unifying cause is the right of return and settlement. And in that, I hope that the Minister will confirm there will be a right of return and settlement, and I understand all the negotiations surrounding the base. There is no reason why that should not include also a right of at least visiting, if not residing, on Diego Garcia itself. The ICJ judgment was very, very clear that the decolonisation process was not properly carried out by Britain in the 1960s when Mauritius achieved its independence, and that has to be righted. That has been voted on by the ICJ, voted on by the General Assembly, endorsed by the Security Council. Is there any more evidence that's necessary to indicate that it is clearly part of Mauritius, and the Chagosians obviously have rights within Mauritius as well as on the Chagos Islands when hopefully they'll be able to return?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I agree with this characterisation of what happened to Chagosians in the past. It's a matter of deep regret for this government, and indeed, I think that regret is shared across the House. As I said, we will have the interests of Chagosians at the heart of this agreement. He is right to characterise the range of views amongst Chagosian communities in response to the question that I just had, and I can confirm to him that the programme of visits will include the ability to visit all of the islands, including Diego Garcia, with the appropriate safeguards in place, and I hope resettlement of the outer islands. That's certainly provision there for that to happen, and I think this is one of the most likely scenarios in which Chagosians can finally return to those outer islands.
Bob Black.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister is trying to say that nothing has changed over this deal. Yet the media reports suggest that the new Prime Minister from Mauritius says the deal's not good enough. And indeed, the Minister is now saying it's the same deal. So clearly there is something that is not being told to this House. Either the amount of money we're paying for the rental of the space is going to have to increase, or alternatively, some terms and conditions have changed. So, thank you, Mr. Speaker, for ensuring that this House can scrutinise this position. The Minister should have given a statement to that effect rather than having to have a UQ. But could we therefore pause this roll, allow the Chagosians to have their say, look at what the American government coming in has to say, and then, before we proceed to this giveaway, make sure that everyone is in agreement?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister of Mauritius has made very clear in his exchange of letters with the Prime Minister of this country, and also indeed in his own statement yesterday, that they are willing to conclude an agreement with us. That's very, very clear. So on the fundamentals, nothing has changed. We're engaged in conversations. It's only natural after an election that they would want to do that and be able to scrutinise the agreement. That's entirely proper. That's why officials have been having those conversations. But I'm not, Mr. Speaker, going to give a running commentary on private discussions.
Jeremy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I know the Minister will want to give the House the greatest possible clarity on what has brought us to this point. The Foreign Secretary has been clear that one of the central considerations for the government was the likelihood, if not the inevitability, of a binding legal judgment against the UK in this matter. The Minister will know that the judgments of the International Court of Justice are not binding on the United Kingdom when disputes between the UK and another state which are or were a member of the Commonwealth. That would include Mauritius. I don't expect the Minister to disclose the legal advice the government has received, but will he please give the House some more clarity about the nature of the legal jeopardy that the government perceives here?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not, for that very reason, going to go into that type of advice. He knows from his extensive and distinguished experience on these matters. But I do have to ask a fundamental question, Mr. Speaker. If there wasn't a problem, why did his government start negotiations on this?
Jane Curland.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. I think we can forgive our overseas territories for being a little bit concerned about this government's commitment to their right to self-determination, because those of us like me who are a little bit older and have long memories will very well remember when the Labour government last time round opened negotiations with the Spanish government over the future of Gibraltar. But what I'm more interested in about today is really reassurance from him that any decision is going to be well informed. So can he tell me which of his ministers has visited the British Indian Ocean territories?
Okay. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I do have to say, and I like the Honourable Lady, but I do find that the constant way in which the Falklands, Gibraltar and other overseas territories which are not comparable to this situation are brought up is extremely unhelpful. They are very clear to me. I have just been, Mr. Speaker, as you know, with the leaders at the Joint Ministerial Council. You graciously hosted a reception as well. We have been absolutely resolute in our commitments to the Falklands and Gibraltar. I've been there and said it to myself directly on the rock. The Minister for the Armed Forces has just been down in the Falklands saying exactly the same as the Falkland Islanders. And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, they are getting fed up with the nonsense that we're hearing, I'm afraid, about this. It's hugely problematic for their interests going forward. So I want to make that absolutely clear.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I refer to my entry in the Register of Members' interest? Surely the Minister must accept, though, that the timing of this announcement was one of the biggest diplomatic gaffes of modern times, because it came literally hours before a general election was called. There was a widespread perception in Mauritius that this government was trying to give a leg up to a very, very unpopular sitting government who subsequently scored 0 out of 60 directly elected seats in the Mauritian Parliament. And doesn't he agree that it is wholly appropriate that the new Labour Mauritian government would be wary of the intentions of his government?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I simply don't recognise the characterisation he's made.
Adley Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Minister update the House on the measures being taken to safeguard against the emergence of Chinese military and surveillance capabilities in British Indian Ocean territory?
Mr. Speaker, I've been very, very clear. There are provisions in the agreement to ensure the security of the outer islands. This deal would not have been agreed by across the United States